My name is Rachel Carter, and I was 35 years old when my world still felt whole, untouched by betrayal, and safe in all the ways I thought mattered. On the surface, my life looked picture perfect. I worked as a book editor from the comfort of our home, usually tucked into the corner of the second bedroom that we'd converted into my office during the pandemic. Daniel, my husband of 7 years, would kiss me on the forehead before leaving for his day at the firm, his crisp suits and confident stride always reminding me why I'd fallen in love with him in the first place. To everyone who knew us, we were the kind of couple who had it all together. We laughed often, we shared routines that felt grounding, and we spoke about the future like it was a story we were co-writing. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. Our mornings were always the same, and I cherished them. Daniel brewed the coffee strong, black, with just a splash of cream for me, and I straightened the bed, fluffing the pillows as sunlight filtered through the curtains of our downtown apartment. The smell of coffee drifting through the kitchen was more than caffeine. It was comfort, consistency, something that whispered, "You're safe here." I'd tease him about his obsession with spreadsheets and numbers, and he'd tease me back about the endless manuscripts I had to read. It was domestic, yes, even ordinary, but I loved that ordinariness. It gave me a sense of stability I'd always longed for. Looking back, I realize how much I trusted him with every detail of our lives. Daniel handled the finances, the paperwork, the big decisions. I never questioned it. He was good at those things, more confident than me when it came to contracts or insurance or anything with a signature line at the bottom. I told myself that this was partnership, that splitting responsibilities was healthy. And for years, it worked. If he said something was handled, I believed him. If he said, "Don't worry about it, Rachel, I've got us," I took a deep breath and let the weight roll off my shoulders. We'd been together for a decade, married for 7, and even though the spark of newness had long faded, I thought what we had was better, solid, reliable, unshakable. We had dinner with friends on weekends, long walks in the park when the weather was kind, and quiet movie nights where he always picked the thrillers and I always tried to stay awake. I didn't see the cracks, or maybe I didn't want to. One of the things I'd been most excited about recently was the idea of starting a family. I'd always wanted to be a mother, but Daniel had been cautious. There was always a reason to wait. A promotion at work, the state of the economy, the need to save more money. But last fall, he finally gave me the reassurance I'd been waiting for. After the holidays, he said, we'd start trying. He'd kissed my temple that night and told me we'd make wonderful parents. My heart swelled at those words, and I believed him completely. I had no way of knowing that behind his warm smile and those reassuring promises, he was already planning a future that would never include the children I dreamed of. It happened on a Tuesday morning, the kind of morning that had started out so normal, so predictable, that I barely remember anything about the first few hours before the pain hit. I was curled up at my desk, hair pulled into a loose bun, blue coffee mug at my side, my laptop screen filled with red-lined edits from an author who couldn't quite nail her dialogue. I remember glancing at the clock on my monitor 9:47 a.m. and thinking if I could get through 3 more chapters before lunch, I'd be ahead for the week. Then, like a lightning bolt, the pain came. It was sharp, brutal, a tearing heat in my lower right abdomen that stole the breath from my lungs. I doubled over, clutching my stomach, the laptop sliding from my lap to the carpet with a dull thud. The author's voice still carried through my wireless earbuds, asking me about a character's motivation, until my gasping drowned her out. "Rachel? Are you okay? Hello?" she asked, but her voice sounded distant, distorted, like it was coming through water. I ripped the earbuds out and fumbled for the keyboard, somehow managing to end the call before collapsing against the arm of my chair. I tried to stand, but the pain forced me to my knees. I crawled toward the bathroom, desperate to reach the toilet, convinced for one wild second that I might vomit or faint. My palms slapped against the cold tile floor, sweat dripping from my forehead. I barely recognized the hoarse sound escaping my throat. It was me, groaning, half sobbing, half praying. Appendicitis. The word surfaced in the fog, a memory of my younger sister's own emergency in college. She described it like being stabbed from the inside out. I knew this had to be it. "Daniel!" I screamed, or tried to. My voice cracked, weak. He was in his home office on a conference call, only a few steps away but impossibly far. My fingers shook as I grabbed my phone from the bathroom counter, the screen blurry as I typed out the message. Something's wrong. Hospital now. Within seconds, I heard his chair scrape against the hardwood, his heavy footsteps racing down the hall. When he found me curled on the bathroom floor, his face drained of color. "Rachel," he shouted, crouching beside me. He scooped me into his arms like I weighed nothing, grabbing my purse with one hand, his keys with the other. The drive to the hospital was both endless and immediate. I was only dimly aware of the city passing by in fragments, the flash of a stoplight, the honk of an impatient horn, the blur of pedestrians. Daniel's hand never left mine. At every red light, he squeezed gently, whispering over and over, "It's going to be okay. I've got you. I've got you." His calm steadied me, though the pain was unrelenting, a fire consuming my side. By the time we reached the emergency room, I was drenched in sweat and barely coherent. Nurses rushed me into triage, their voices quick but kind. "Blood pressure dropping, get a line in. She's guarding her right side. We need imaging." Everything happened too fast to process. Daniel answered every question the staff fired at him: name, age, medical history, insurance provider. I couldn't have formed the words if I tried. The ultrasound tech pressed a probe against my abdomen, apologizing for the cold gel. I nearly screamed as the device touched the source of the agony. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," she murmured, but she kept working. The ER doctor appeared soon after, tall and brisk, his eyes scanning the screen. "Acute appendicitis," he confirmed. "We need to take her to surgery before it ruptures." Relief and fear tangled inside me. Relief that it had a name, that there was a fix. Fear because surgery meant anesthesia, knives, vulnerability. Still, I nodded weakly. Anything to stop the pain. Daniel was right there, notebook app open on his phone, asking questions like he always did. How long would it take? What risks were involved? How soon could I recover? He looked like the perfect husband, calm, protective, detail-oriented. I clung to that image as they wheeled me into pre-op, still believing with every fiber of my being that he was my anchor in this storm. That was when the nurse came in with a clipboard. She was older, with wire-rimmed glasses and a no-nonsense voice softened by experience. "Mrs. Carter, I just need to review the procedures with you and get your consent signature." Procedures. Plural. The words sliced through my haze, but before I could ask, Daniel stepped forward, his hand firm on my shoulder. "We've already discussed this with the doctor," he said smoothly. His tone was patient but edged, the way he spoke when he wanted to shut down unnecessary questions. "She's in a lot of pain. Can we move this along?" The nurse hesitated, her brows knitting together as she studied the paperwork. "Well, I'll still need her signature." "She'll sign." Daniel interrupted, already reaching for the pen. "Here, honey. Just scribble your name. I'll help." He guided the pen into my shaking hand, his grip steady around my fingers. The morphine haze made everything feel floaty, detached. My scrawl on the line barely resembled my name. "What second procedure?" I tried to mumble, but the words came out slurred, thick. My tongue felt too heavy to form the sounds. "Shh, baby." Daniel soothed, brushing hair back from my damp forehead. "Don't worry about it. Just rest. You'll be fine." He kissed me lightly, the kind of kiss that once made me feel safe, cherished. The nurse still looked uncertain, but after a long pause, she nodded and collected the clipboard. "We'll get you ready." The gurney jerked into motion, carrying me toward the sterile double doors of the operating room. I wanted to ask again what second procedure, but the anesthesiologist was already at my side, mask in hand. "Count backward from 10 for me, Mrs. Carter," he instructed warmly. 10. Nina. 8. I was still fighting to form the question. What second procedure? 7. 6. Darkness swallowed me before the words ever left my lips. Waking up from surgery felt like dragging myself through mud. At first, there was only the beep of machines, steady and unrelenting, and the heavy weight of my eyelids refusing to cooperate. My throat burned, raw from the breathing tube, and when I swallowed it felt like sandpaper scratching down into my chest. Slowly, as if swimming up from the bottom of a deep pool, I opened my eyes. The ceiling above me was dimly lit, pale green walls fading into shadows. A nurse stood nearby, adjusting my IV. She was younger than the one I remembered from pre-op, her hair woven into neat braids, pulled back in a ponytail. Her badge read Nurse Kelly. When she saw my eyes flicker open, she smiled. "There she is," she said gently. "Welcome back, Mrs. Carter. How are you feeling?" "Thirsty," I croaked. My voice didn't sound like mine, it was too dry, too thin. "That's normal," she said. She guided a straw to my lips, and I sipped slowly, the cool water easing some of the scratch in my throat. For a moment, I thought everything was fine. The pain was there, yes, but manageable, a dull ache where my appendix had been. Except, no. This pain wasn't just where it was supposed to be. When I shifted to take another sip, a sharp, radiating soreness clawed through my lower abdomen deeper, more intimate. I gasped and dropped the straw, clutching the thin hospital blanket. Kelly froze. Her eyes flicked to my monitor as it beeped faster, recording my sudden spike in heart rate. "Easy," she said quickly. Her tone calm but her hands pausing in midair. "That pain will go away in a few days. You've been through a lot. But, it's not just here." I pointed weakly toward my side, where the appendix incision should have been. My hand drifted lower, over my pelvis. "It hurts down there. Is that normal for appendicitis?" Her hand stilled completely. For a moment, she didn't say anything. She glanced at the door, then back at me. Something flickered in her eyes, conflict, hesitation, maybe even fear. "What?" I demanded, my voice breaking. "Tell me." Kelly lowered her voice, leaning closer. "Didn't they tell you about the second procedure?" Her words sliced through me like ice water. The room tilted. I shook my head, suddenly wide awake despite the lingering fog of anesthesia. "Second procedure? What are you talking about?" She bit her lip, visibly wrestling with herself. Then she drew the curtain around my bed, creating a pocket of privacy. When she spoke again, it was barely more than a whisper. "Your husband approved another surgery while you were under. A tubal ligation." The beeping of my heart monitor quickened, shrill and frantic, echoing the panic exploding inside me. My breath caught. "What? Number? No, that's not possible." I never. "I shouldn't be telling you this," Kelly said, glancing nervously at the door again. "I could lose my job, but you deserve to know. It was done during your appendectomy. You've been sterilized." Her words blurred. Sterilized. Tubal ligation. It was like she was speaking another language, one my body understood before my mind did. The deep soreness in my pelvis, the strange heaviness, it wasn't just recovery, pain. Something had been taken from me. "No," I whispered, shaking my head violently. "That's wrong. I didn't agree to that. I want children. We were going to start after the holidays. He promised." Kelly's face was pale, her eyes full of sympathy, but also fear. "Please try to stay calm," she urged. "The surgeon will explain everything when he makes rounds." "Stay calm?" My voice rose, ragged. "They cut into my body without asking me. I didn't sign anything. I didn't consent." I fumbled for the table beside me, nearly knocking over the water cup in my desperation to grab my phone. My hands trembled as I dialed Daniel's number. 1 ring, 2, 3, voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail. Again. Still nothing. My voice shook as I left the message. "Daniel, what happened? What did you do? I need to know what they did to me. Call me back." Kelly placed a hand on my shoulder, but I flinched away. "Don't touch me," I snapped, though my anger wasn't meant for her. She looked stricken but stepped back. The minutes crawled by, each one stretching into eternity. Every beat of the monitor beside me was a reminder that something irreversible had happened inside my body, while I'd been unconscious, defenseless. An hour later, Dr. Anders appeared. He was tall, with neatly combed silver hair, and a confident air that might have reassured other patients. To me, he looked like a predator in a white coat. "Mrs. Carter," he greeted, pulling up a chair. "How are you feeling? What did you do to me?" My voice was flat, icy. He cleared his throat. "Your surgery was successful. We removed your appendix before it ruptured. Additionally? I cut in. "What was the second procedure?" "A bilateral tubal ligation," he said, as if announcing the weather. "Your husband expressed concerns about long-term gynecological issues, and we thought it best to address them while you were already under anesthesia. It's a common procedure, completely safe. If you decide to pursue children later, IVF is always an option. Oh, my hands clenched the blanket so hard my knuckles turned white. You sterilized me, I said, barely recognizing my own voice. He nodded, calm and patronizing. It was all documented with the proper consent forms. Your husband signed, and we have your signature as well. That's impossible. I didn't sign anything. Actually, you did. He slid a tablet onto his lap, showing me a digital copy of a form. My name scrawled across the bottom, except it wasn't my handwriting. The loops were wrong, the slant unfamiliar. That's not me, I whispered. My chest tightened as though the air had been ripped from the room. Your husband confirmed you had been nervous about the procedure but had discussed it extensively. He thought this was the right time. I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip the IV out of my arm and tear the monitor from my chest. Instead, I whispered the only words I could muster. Get out. Dr. Anders frowned. Mrs. Carter, I understand this is upsetting. Get out. My voice was a growl now, low and dangerous. He stood, smoothing his coat as if I were a difficult client rather than a human being whose future he had just mutilated. I'll return when you're calmer. When he left, the curtain swayed slightly in his wake. My entire body trembled. I felt the bandages across my abdomen, small sterile strips over tiny incisions, and the knowledge that beneath them, something permanent had been stolen. Kelly returned, her face full of sympathy. Without a word, she slipped me a manila folder. I shouldn't be doing this, she whispered, but you need to see it. Inside was a copy of the surgical consent form. My name was there but wrong. The R2 round, the Carter slanted differently than I'd ever written. It was a forgery. Below it, Daniel's signature, neat and confident, with a note. Patient's husband confirms previous discussions regarding permanent birth control. Patient experiences anxiety regarding separate procedure. Recommends completion during appendectomy. I stared until the words blurred. My world tilted. This wasn't just a mistake. This was deliberate. Planned. Authorized by the man who kissed me goodnight, who promised me children, who swore he'd protect me. Hot tears streaked my face, pooling into the pillow. I pressed my hands over my abdomen, over the betrayal cut into my flesh. Why? I whispered into the sterile silence of the recovery room. Why would he do this to me? No one answered. Daniel came the next morning, walking into my hospital room like nothing in the world was out of place. He had a bouquet of white roses in his hand, my favorite, and a bright, easy smile plastered across his face. It was the smile I had once fallen for. The smile that used to make me feel safe, but now, it felt like a mask. A performance carefully rehearsed for the role of devoted husband. He leaned down to kiss my forehead, his cologne sharp against the sterile air, and set the roses on the nightstand as if flowers could erase what had been done to me. How are you feeling, sweetheart? He asked warmly, pulling up the visitor's chair and sitting at my bedside. He looked so casual, so unbothered, as if I hadn't woken up in the middle of a nightmare that he himself had orchestrated. I stared at him, my throat dry, my chest tight. What did you do? I asked flatly. His smile faltered, just a fraction, but he quickly recovered. What do you mean, baby? I've been in meetings all morning. I'm sorry I couldn't come last night, but I checked with the nurses, you came through just fine. I gripped the blanket, forcing my voice not to shake. The surgery, Daniel. The tubal ligation. What did you do? For the first time, his mask slipped. A flicker of something, annoyance? Fear passed through his eyes before he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees like a man preparing to console a hysterical wife. Rachel, he began softly. You're still groggy from the anesthesia. You're confused. You must have misunderstood. I'm not confused. I shoved the papers Kelly had given me across the bed toward him. I saw the consent form. I saw your signature. You authorized them to sterilize me without my consent. Hell. His jaw tightened, and he ran a hand through his hair, that familiar gesture I used to find endearing. Now it felt like a signal that he was trying to buy time. Rachel. He sighed, lowering his voice into that patronizing tone I suddenly realized I'd heard too many times before. We've talked about this. You were terrified of childbirth. Remember the panic attack you had when Sarah brought her baby over last month? You said you couldn't imagine going through that. You said it terrified you. That never happened. I snapped, my voice rising. Sarah hasn't visited in months. And I want children. Daniel. We were supposed to start trying after the holidays, you promised. He shook his head slowly, pityingly, as though I were a child throwing a tantrum. Baby. You've been under so much stress. Work, deadlines, hormones, it all clouds your judgment. You don't realize how unstable you've been. I did what was best for both of us, for our future. Ever Pater. Our future? My chest ached as tears stung my eyes. You took away my choice. You took away everything I wanted. I protected you from yourself, he said firmly. Children would ruin everything we've built. Our lifestyle, your career, our relationship, it would all fall apart. You know this deep down, Rachel. One day, you'll thank me. The words made my skin crawl. Thank him? For stealing from me? For mutilating my body and calling it love? Get out. I whispered. He looked almost amused. Don't be dramatic. You're not thinking clearly. We'll talk when you're calmer. He stood, straightening his tie like he was preparing for a board meeting instead of leaving behind the wreckage of my trust. I said, get out. My voice cracked with fury, my body trembling as monitors beeped wildly beside me. Daniel frowned, but finally turned toward the door. I'll come back when you're rational, he said over his shoulder. The moment he left, I collapsed against the pillow, my sobs muffled by the thin hospital blanket. My whole body hurt, but nothing compared to the pain splitting my chest wide open. He had taken everything from me, the dream of children, the future we'd planned, the trust I had placed so foolishly in his hands. And the worst part was the ease with which he dismissed me, rewriting my reality, like he always had, as if my memories, my desires, my body itself were his to control. The curtain rustled, and Kelly stepped inside quietly. She closed it again, her face tight with sympathy. I'm so sorry, she whispered. She pulled a folder from under her scrubs and handed it to me. I made copies of everything. The original consent forms, the surgical notes, the nurse's log. I shouldn't be giving you this, it could cost me my job, but you need proof. My hands shook as I opened the folder. Inside were the documents that made the nightmare undeniable. My signature scrawled at the bottom of the consent form, unfamiliar loops and slants betraying the forgery. Daniel's bold signature below it, steady and sure, with the added note about my supposed anxiety. And in the procedure description, in cold clinical type, bilateral tubal ligation via laparoscopic approach. Tears blurred the page as I traced the words with my finger. Such a small phrase to describe something so monumental, so final. They had taken away my ability to carry life, to choose motherhood, to decide what happened to my own body, and Daniel had orchestrated it all. My sobs came harder, shaking my entire body. Kelly rested a hand lightly on my arm, this time I didn't flinch. Her touch was grounding, human, the only kindness in a sea of betrayal. You're not crazy, she said softly, her eyes fierce. Don't let him make you believe otherwise. What he did, it was wrong. It was criminal. End of sex. I clutched the folder to my chest as if it were a life raft. Proof. Evidence. Something tangible to remind me that I wasn't imagining this. That I wasn't hysterical or unstable. That my reality was real, no matter how much Daniel tried to twist it. That night, alone in the hospital bed, I stared at the ceiling, my body aching from the incisions and my heart from the betrayal. I thought about the Rachel I'd been just days earlier, making coffee, teasing Daniel, dreaming of a baby. That Rachel was gone. In her place was someone raw, wounded, and furious. Someone who would never see her husband the same way again. I pressed my hand against my abdomen, over the bandages that covered the tiny incisions. Such small scars, I whispered to myself, for something so massive. I let the tears come until exhaustion dragged me under again. But even in sleep, one truth echoed louder than anything else. Daniel had stolen from me, but I wasn't going to let him convince me it was love. I was discharged from the hospital the next afternoon, even though every part of me wanted to stay. The thought of going home to him made my stomach twist. But the insurance company had their rules, and the doctors said I was recovering well. Uncomplicated appendectomy, the paperwork read, as if the rest hadn't happened. Maya, my best friend since college, drove me home. She had been texting me nonstop since I told her what Daniel had done. She burst into my apartment with me, her arms full of bags from the pharmacy, and her face full of worry. "Don't worry about anything," she said, helping me to the couch. "I've got you. Tea, soup, whatever you need. Just say the word." I stared around our apartment, but it no longer felt like mine. Every piece of furniture looked foreign, tainted. The framed wedding photo on the mantel mocked me, his hand on my waist, both of us smiling like we had a future worth protecting. I wanted to smash it. "I can't stay here," I whispered, pulling the blanket around me tighter. "Not with him." "You won't have to," Maya said firmly. "But first we need proof. You said the nurse gave you copies of the paperwork, right?" I nodded, clutching the folder like a shield. "Yes, but what if he says I forged it? What if?" Maya crouched down in front of me, her brown eyes steady. "Rachel, listen to me. We are going to find more. Men like Daniel always leave trails. Emails, messages, something. We just need to look." I hesitated. "His office is locked." "Then we'll find the key," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Daniel wasn't home. He texted me some nonsense about a late meeting, like nothing had happened, like he hadn't stolen my future. That gave us time. We started in the obvious places. Under the doormat, the junk drawer in the kitchen, the shelf in the hall closet. Nothing." Frustration built in my chest until Maya snapped her fingers. "Picture frames," she said. Sure enough, taped to the back of our wedding photo was a small silver key. "Of course," I muttered bitterly, peeling it free. Our marriage as the hiding place for all his secrets. The office door clicked open, revealing a room that felt like stepping into another life entirely. Everything was meticulously organized, file cabinets lining one wall, each drawer labeled in his precise handwriting. His desk was spotless, laptop closed, pens aligned perfectly. It was too neat, too controlled, like the man himself. We began pulling open drawers. Client files, financial records, nothing unusual at first. But then I found a folder shoved between two binders. Inside were brochures, medical pamphlets about sterilization procedures. Options for permanent birth control. The benefits of a tubal ligation. My blood ran cold. "Look at this," I whispered, spreading the papers across the desk. Maya's jaw tightened. He was researching this. Planning it. We dug deeper. In the bottom left drawer, locked with a separate combination, we struck gold. I stared at the dial, trying to think. What numbers would he use? His birthday? Our anniversary? Neither worked. Then it hit me, his old lucky number, 2743. My hands shook as the drawer clicked open. Inside were stacks of documents and printed emails. I skimmed the first page and felt bile rise in my throat. It was a chain between Daniel and Dr. Anders, the very surgeon who had stood in my room, patronizing me while defending his protocol. And clue. Daniel's words leapt off the page. What if the patient is incapacitated or unable to make decisions? What are the legal options? Dr. Anders had responded cautiously. Spousal consent is sometimes accepted in emergencies, provided documentation is thorough. Daniel's reply, understood. I'll make sure the paperwork is prepared. I slapped the paper down on the desk, my hands trembling. This is conspiracy. He planned this. He knew exactly what he was doing. End of team. Maya read over my shoulder, her face hardening. This is beyond betrayal. This is criminal. As if that wasn't enough, I found another folder, this one filled with screenshots of my search history. Pages I'd visited on fertility clinics, baby names, parenting blogs. My private dreams cataloged, printed, and weaponized. There were notes in the margins, his handwriting labeling them as obsessive, irrational, unstable. He was building a case against you, Maya said grimly, making you out to be crazy so no one would believe you. My hands shook as I shoved the folder aside. That's when I noticed something small, black, and rectangular tucked behind the files. A second phone. I pulled it out, my heart hammering. It was locked, but Daniel had always been predictable. I typed in 2743. The screen lit up. What I saw made my stomach drop. Dozens of messages, stretching back months, with a contact saved as V. My blood went cold as I opened the thread. V. Is it done yet? Daniel. Soon. I need the timing to be right. V. She's obsessed with the baby thing. Isn't she? Daniel. Exactly. That's why this has to happen. I won't let her trap me. My vision blurred as I scrolled further. Photos appeared. Vanessa. A coworker I'd met at last year's holiday party. She'd complimented my dress, asked about kids. At the time, I thought it was harmless, small talk. Now, seeing her face in these intimate selfies, her messages about our future, made me want to scream. One message stood out like a knife in my chest. Daniel. If she can't have kids, the prenup changes everything. No children, and I protect my assets. With the surgery, she won't even know what hit her. I dropped the phone onto the desk as if it had burned me. He was planning to leave me, I whispered. This wasn't just about control, he wanted me out of the way. End of chapter. Maya's hands clenched into fists. He mutilated you for money. For convenience. For her. I staggered back, pressing a hand to my stomach, to the scars that now felt like brands of ownership. Daniel had reduced me to a problem to be solved, a barrier to be removed. And he had done it so carefully, so deliberately, that it terrified me. Maya grabbed my shoulders, steadying me. Rachel, listen to me. We have everything we need. The emails, the phone, the papers, it's proof. He can't talk his way out of this. I nodded numbly, though the weight of it all pressed down like a mountain. The man I'd built my life with, the man who had promised to love me, had plotted behind my back not just to betray me, but to erase me. I glanced around the office, at the rows of tidy folders, the pristine desk. The carefully crafted facade of a man who had everything under control. For the first time, I saw it for what it was: not order, not professionalism, but obsession. An obsession with control so deep that he had stolen my very ability to choose my future. As Maya gathered the papers into a bag, I picked up the second phone again. My reflection stared back at me in the dark screen, pale, scarred, but alive. Alive and holding the evidence of his betrayal in my hands. He thought he had silenced me. He thought he had taken away my choices. But in this moment, clutching the proof of his lies, I realized something he hadn't counted on. I wasn't broken. I was enraged. And I was ready to fight. The morning after I discovered the truth, I sat in the back of Maya's car with the manila folder in my lap and the burner phone clutched in my hand. Every scar on my abdomen throbbed as if reminding me of the reason we were driving across town. My body was evidence, my pain living proof, but I needed more than anger to fight this. I needed someone who could dismantle Daniel's careful lies, someone who would believe me when he inevitably tried to paint me as unstable. Maya had already done the legwork. Susan Lee. She'd said the night before, her voice sharp with determination. She's ruthless, Rachel. Women's rights. Medical malpractice. Spousal abuse, this is her battlefield. If anyone can take Daniel down, it's her. And Susan's office was in a sleek downtown building, the kind with glass walls and polished floors that made you feel small walking through the lobby. But when her assistant ushered me inside, I instantly understood what Maya meant. Susan Lee was in her early 40s, her black hair cut into a sharp bob that framed her face like armor. Her eyes, dark behind designer glasses, didn't waver as she stood to shake my hand. Rachel Carter? Her grip was firm, steady. Come in. Sit down. I understand you've been through something unusual. That word unusual nearly broke me. But as I sat down, I opened the folder, slid the forged consent forms across her desk, and unlocked the burner phone. I told her everything. From the moment the pain first hit at 9:47 a.m. to the nurse whispering about the second procedure, to the discovery of Daniel's emails and Vanessa's texts. My voice trembled at first, but the longer I spoke, the more steel crept into my tone. Susan didn't interrupt. She took notes, her pen scratching furiously across the pad. When I finished, she leaned back, tapping the end of her pen against her chin. This, she said slowly, is one of the most egregious cases of medical battery and spousal coercion I've ever heard. Tears stung my eyes, but I forced myself to stay upright. So I'm not crazy. Her gaze softened, just slightly. No, Rachel. You're not crazy. You were violated, and not just by your husband, but by a medical professional who had a duty to protect you. I exhaled shakily, relief and rage colliding inside me. We're looking at multiple fronts, Susan continued. Medical malpractice, forgery, fraud, conspiracy, spousal coercion. This isn't just a divorce case, it's criminal. The hospital has liability. Dr. Anders has liability. And your husband. She paused, narrowing her eyes. Your husband has no idea what's coming. And her confidence steadied me in a way nothing else had since the surgery. For the first time, I felt less like a victim and more like a soldier preparing for battle. But Susan wasn't done. She leaned forward, her voice lowering. Rachel, you need to understand something. Men like your husband, they don't go down quietly. He will lie. He will gaslight. He will try to convince everyone you're unstable. He might even get aggressive. So you have to be smart. You have to act. He swallowed hard. What do you mean? You have to pretend, she said. Pretend you're forgiving. Pretend you believe him. Let him think he's still in control while you gather more evidence. The emails, the money trail, conversations with him that you can record. The stronger our case, the faster we crush him. The thought of pretending to love him again made bile rise in my throat. But Susan's words echoed the truth I already knew. Daniel had planned this meticulously. If I confronted him directly, he'd twist it until I was the villain. I couldn't afford righteous anger. I had to outplay him at his own game. I can do that. I said finally, my voice steady. I can act. Susan smiled faintly. Good. Because we're not just going to divorce this man, Rachel. We're going to dismantle him. That night, I rehearsed in front of the bathroom mirror. Smiling when I wanted to scream. Softening my voice when every word I spoke was coated with venom. You were right, Daniel. Maybe I was overreacting. My reflection grimaced back at me, but I forced the words until they sounded believable. When he came home late, his tie loosened and his cologne sharp, I met him at the door with a smile I didn't feel. Hi, I said softly. I'm sorry for yelling at the hospital. I was scared. And his eyes searched mine, wary at first. But then his shoulders relaxed, and he smiled that charming, infuriating smile. I knew you'd come around, sweetheart. He kissed my forehead like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't mutilated me. Inside, rage clawed at my ribs, but outwardly, I nodded and let him believe his illusion. The performance began. Over the next week, I played the part of the forgiving wife. I laughed at his jokes, I listened to his endless talk about work, I even let him hold me at night when all I wanted was to roll away and cry. And in those moments when he believed I was his again, I recorded everything. Every slip of the tongue, every dismissive comment about children ruining our lives, every time he justified his decision as love. One evening over dinner, he looked at me with smug satisfaction. See, this is why I had to make the choice for us. You get caught up in emotions, but I think rationally. I protect us from bad decisions. I smiled sweetly, hiding the phone recording in my lap. Of course, I murmured, you always know best. He beamed. That's my smart girl. I excused myself to the bathroom and locked the door, shaking with silent fury. I pressed my hands against my abdomen, over the scars that would never go away, and whispered, not anymore. Meanwhile, Susan and her team worked tirelessly. She subpoenaed hospital records, traced the $15,000 payment Daniel had made to Dr. Anders' consulting company, and began drafting lawsuits. Each day I met with her felt like arming myself with more weapons, more armor. Maya was my co-conspirator, keeping me grounded when the performance became too much. I don't know how you do it, she said one afternoon as we sat in a cafe, far from Daniel's office. Anger, I said simply. Every time he lies, every time he pats my hand like I'm a child, I remind myself I'm collecting evidence. And when the time comes, I'll burn his world to the ground. She squeezed my hand, pride and fury blazing in her eyes. Good. Make him pay. The strangest part of it all was how much stronger I began to feel. For years, I had let Daniel take the lead on finances, decisions, even our future plans. I thought it was trust. I thought it was partnership. But standing in Susan's office, watching Maya's eyes flash with loyalty, sitting alone at night, with the folder of evidence, I realized it had been control all along. He had controlled me. Not anymore. The rage that had once threatened to drown me hardened into something else. Resolve. It became fuel, a fire in my veins that pushed me forward. I wasn't going to cry myself to sleep anymore. I wasn't going to beg him for explanations or accept his warped version of reality. I was preparing for war. And Daniel had no idea. The plan was simple, at least on the surface. Act like the wife who had finally come to terms with her husband's decisions, play the part one last time, and then rip the mask from his face in a way he could never recover from. Susan had called it the coup de grace, a staged moment designed not only to serve him legally but to strip him of the power he believed he held over me. I thought about it every night while lying beside him, his breath steady and oblivious while I lay awake, plotting the end of our marriage, our life, and his illusion of control. I chose a Friday evening for the performance. I want to celebrate us. I told him earlier in the week, forcing my voice to sound hopeful, almost shy. I think I've finally accepted everything. Maybe you were right about kids, about our lifestyle. I want to start fresh. Just you and me. He looked at me, suspicious for a moment, and then that smug, self-satisfied smile spread across his face. I knew you'd come around, Rachel. I knew you'd see that I was protecting us. It made me sick, but I lowered my gaze as if embarrassed. So Friday? A special dinner, just us. I'll cook. He kissed my cheek, already imagining victory. Perfect. I spent the entire day preparing, though not in the way he imagined. The food was real. I roasted his favorite lemon chicken, set the table with our wedding china, poured champagne into long-stemmed flutes. I wore a dress he'd always loved, one that made me feel exposed. But tonight it was armor. While the chicken baked, I set up the living room television with the USB drive Susan had given me, loaded with the hospital security footage and the secretly recorded meeting between Daniel and Dr. Anders. By the time he walked through the door, carrying a bottle of champagne with that cocky grin, the apartment smelled warm and inviting. He kissed me on the forehead, and I let him. You've really outdone yourself, he said, loosening his tie. I knew you'd come back to me eventually. This is why we work, Rachel, you always come back to reason. I smiled sweetly and handed him his glass. To our future, I said, raising mine. To our future, he echoed, clinking against mine. We ate in silence at first, him praising the food, me pretending to care. Then, after dessert, I stood. My hands trembled slightly, but I steadied them against the back of my chair. There's something I want to show you. He frowned, suspicious again. What is it? I led him into the living room, the soft glow of candles flickering in the background. I picked up the remote and pressed play. The screen filled with grainy footage from the hospital. Daniel at the nurse's station. Daniel signing papers. The timestamp clear. I was already in surgery. His face drained of color. What is this? Keep watching, I said calmly. The video zoomed in, Susan's team having enhanced it. His hand moved confidently across the page, forging my name on the consent form. He stood abruptly, knocking his glass over. This doesn't prove anything. You probably signed it earlier and forgot. My voice didn't waver. I also have the recording from Dr. Anders' office. The one where you discuss how to keep me from remembering. How to make sure the paperwork looked right. His mouth opened and closed, searching for words. And the emails, I continued. The ones where you begged multiple doctors to sterilize me without consent. The payment records $15,000 wired to Anders the day before my surgery. And of course, your little side project with Vanessa. I lifted the burner phone, my thumb hovering over the screen. Should I read the part where you said I was trying to trap you? Or the part where you promised her you'd leave me once I couldn't give you children? Daniel's face twisted into something ugly, the charm stripped away. You've been spying on me. You broke into my office. This is illegal. I almost laughed. Illegal? You mutilated me, Daniel. You forged my name, paid off a doctor, and stole my future. And you want to talk about illegal? At that moment, the doorbell rang. His head snapped toward it, confusion flashing across his features. You should get that, I said evenly. He hesitated, then stormed to the door. A process server stood on the other side, professional and detached. Daniel Carter? Yes. He snapped. The server handed him a thick envelope. You've been served. Without another word, the man turned and left. Daniel tore it open, his eyes scanning rapidly, face cycling through disbelief, rage, and finally fear. Divorce? Fraud? Malpractice? You can't do this to me. I stood tall, every nerve in my body on fire. I already did. And this is just the beginning. The weeks that followed were a blur of courtrooms and depositions. Susan guided me through every step, her calm ferocity a shield I desperately needed. Daniel came armed with his lawyer, a slick man named Richard Brennan, who specialized in defending wealthy husbands from vindictive wives. But all the arrogance in the world couldn't compete with the mountain of evidence we brought. The forged signatures. The security footage. The bank records of the bribes. The texts with Vanessa. Piece by piece, Susan dismantled him, until there was nothing left of the man who once controlled everything. In deposition, Daniel lost his temper more than once. She would have ruined everything, he shouted, slamming his hand on the table. My career, our lifestyle, she's too naive to see it. I saved us. The court reporter's fingers flew across the keys, recording every damning word. Susan leaned back in her chair, smiling coldly. Thank you, Mr. Carter. No further questions. The criminal investigation unfolded in parallel. The district attorney, faced with overwhelming evidence, filed charges of fraud, conspiracy, assault, and medical battery. Dr. Anders, desperate to save himself, turned on Daniel, testifying under oath about their secret meetings. He insisted it be done without her knowledge, Anders admitted, sweat beading on his forehead. He said pregnancy would trap him in the marriage. He offered me money, and I made the worst decision of my career. Anders lost his license. His name, once respected in the medical community, became synonymous with betrayal. He would serve time in minimum security prison, his reputation in ashes. But Daniel faced worse. His firm, horrified by the scandal, placed him on indefinite leave and eventually fired him outright. Word spread through the industry, his name blacklisted. Vanessa abandoned him, issuing a statement through her attorney that she'd been misled. His family, once so proud, distanced themselves, whispering about his poor judgment, but refusing to stand by him publicly. And in court, as the jury listened to his justifications, his arrogance finally crumbled. You view your wife as property, the prosecutor said bluntly. I view her as my responsibility. Daniel shot back. Your responsibility to control. To silence. To mutilate without consent? His eyes darted toward me for the first time, something flickering there, not remorse, but panic. Yes, he whispered, too soft for his lawyer to stop him. The jury took less than 3 hours. Guilty. On all counts. The day he was sentenced, I sat in the courtroom in a simple black dress, my scars hidden but burning all the same. Daniel stood in his suit, shoulders slumped, no trace of the confident man who once dictated my every choice. 8 years, the judge pronounced. For fraud, forgery, assault, and conspiracy. The gavel cracked, final and sharp. As they led him away in cuffs, he twisted to look at me. His mouth opened, but I couldn't hear his words over the pounding in my ears. For the first time in years, I didn't care what he had to say. His voice meant nothing to me now. I walked out of that courtroom lighter, though not healed, not yet. Healing would take time. But justice? Justice had begun. And Daniel Carter, the man who once thought he could steal my choices and bury me beneath his lies, was behind bars where he belonged. When the trial ended and the cell door slammed behind Daniel, I knew I had to decide what came next. I couldn't live in the apartment we had shared, a place where every chair, every photo, every wall carried the echo of his betrayal. So I left. I packed only what was mine, sold the rest, and rented a small cottage by the coast. The air there was different, clean, briny, alive. At night, the crash of the waves replaced the silence of our sterile apartment, and I finally felt like I could breathe without looking over my shoulder. But freedom didn't erase the scars. It didn't return what had been taken from me. Some mornings, I woke up pressing a hand against my stomach, half expecting the pain of fresh betrayal. I'd stare at the faded lines across my abdomen and remind myself. They are not just wounds, they are proof I survived. That mantra carried me into something bigger. I refused to let my story end as just another headline. With Susan's help, I founded the Carter Foundation for Medical Autonomy. Ironic, I know, carrying his last name, but I wanted it to sting every time he heard it from prison. We built it as a refuge for women who had experienced reproductive coercion, medical betrayal, or abuse disguised as protection. We offered legal resources, counseling, and above all, a safe place where no one's voice could be silenced. It grew faster than I ever expected. Letters poured in. Stories that mirrored mine in haunting ways, husbands who sabotaged birth control, doctors who dismissed pain until it was too late, women who had been convinced they were too emotional to know their own minds. Every testimony lit a fire in me, pushing me to fight harder. I became not just a survivor but an advocate. I stood in front of legislators and testified for stricter consent laws, demanding that no patient ever again be wheeled into surgery without their explicit, documented approval. Some days my voice shook, but I spoke anyway, because silence was what had almost destroyed me. And somewhere in the middle of all this fighting, I allowed myself to open a small door to something softer. Love, cautious and steady, found me again in Marcus, a widower who owned the local bookstore. He never pushed, never tried to fix me, only walked beside me, patient with my broken edges. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like someone's possession. I felt chosen and free to choose in return. The biggest choice came later. Motherhood had been stolen from me in one form, but Daniel hadn't taken the dream itself. 2 years after his sentencing, I adopted a little girl named Sophie. She was 7. Full of anger and mistrust that felt painfully familiar, but slowly, she learned I wasn't going anywhere. When she introduced me at school as my mom, she chose me. I cried harder than I had in years. Standing on the shore one evening, watching Sophie chase waves while Marcus read nearby, I realized something simple but profound. Daniel hadn't destroyed me. He had forced me to become someone stronger. I was no longer defined by betrayal. I was a survivor, an advocate, a mother by choice and his worst nightmare. When I look back on everything that happened, what stands out isn't just the betrayal or the scars, it's the lesson hidden beneath the pain. I once believed love meant trust without question, that giving someone control over the details of our life was a sign of devotion. But I learned the hard way that blind trust can be dangerous when placed in the wrong hands. Choice, especially over our own bodies and futures, is sacred. No partner, no doctor, no authority has the right to take that away. What Daniel and Dr. Anders did to me wasn't just a violation of medicine or marriage. It was a violation of humanity, an attempt to strip me of my voice. But I discovered that even when someone tries to erase your power, you can reclaim it piece by piece. Pain can harden into strength, betrayal can turn into resolve, and loss can open new paths you never imagined. Today, I live with scars that remind me daily of what was taken, but also of what I rebuilt. The most important lesson? No one else defines my future. I do. And I will never again surrender that power. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.